Welcome to Solution Focused World. I'm Joe George.
Today, we are blessed with the presence of Dr. Jacqui von Cziffra-Bergs. And Jacqui, how do you like to be introduced?
I'm a psychologist here in Johannesburg, South Africa, and I run the Solution Focused Institute down at the bottom of Africa.
And what exactly does the Solution Focused Institute do?
It started with me training psychologists, counselors, and social workers. And of late, it's really changed. I train a lot of teachers. I go to a lot of schools. So the Institute has moved into schools. I do a lot of work for one of our, you call them states, we call it a province. One of our provinces, I go into rural Zululand and train teachers in the rural area. And because of COVID and the wonderful accessibility of Zoom, I also, in the last 2 years, have done quite a bit of corporate work for two big banks, looking at hope and how to stay hopeful. So the Institute we do a lot. We train as many people as we can. And yes, I do face-to-face workshops. And I also train at some universities. I'll be flying down to Central South Africa tomorrow to train intern psychologists that are going to climb onto the train of hope. It's a train that travels through rural areas, and they have a psychology carriage. They have an optometrist, a gynecologist, a GP, and we also have a psychology carriage. And all the interns are going onto the train of hope, and I get to train them on Wednesday. So that's also exciting.
That's excellent.
Joe, it started when I went to a brief therapy conference in the States. And I attended a Steve DeShazer workshop. I think it was 2003. It makes me so old. And I remember walking out of that thinking, this is either the weirdest, strangest thing I've ever met and something I'll never do, or it is sheer brilliance. And since then, I've been fascinated by how we can help people without that whole medical model and that whole idea of making a diagnosis and labeling people. And I suppose for me personally, it started with that workshop of Steve, because I just walked out and thought, I've got to read up more. I've got to find out what this is, because it looked like brilliance, or maybe it was just something that I didn't understand. And since then, I've just been reading and exploring as much as I can. That solution-focused therapy makes you a happier clinician. And I cannot agree with you more. I mean, I really, really believe that it gives us the ability to do our jobs better. It gives us the ability to see more people than we normally would, and to keep going. You know, there's a fantastic solution-focused therapist I work with often, all the time nearly. His name is Tabasani Nkube, and he lives in Tanzania. And Tabu works for an organization called the Foundation for Tomorrow. It's schools in Tanzania. And we wrote a book here in South Africa called Creative Solution Building, where we got different people just to write chapters on how they use solution-focused therapy in different settings. And Tabu wrote this amazing chapter about his work in Tanzania and how his mission is to help the youth dream again. and and he says solution focused therapy is a philosophy of life. It's your approach to everything, and then it happens to be how you work as well.
Do you use solution-focused thinking in your own life?
Absolutely, completely. I mean, I personally think it saves my life on a daily basis as a person. I mean, the whole institute started because of a family crisis 7 years ago, where my husband was made redundant. His company did a whole restructure, and I suddenly became the breadwinner of our family. And I did something so unlike solution-focused thinking. Joe, in that moment of crisis, I tried to problem solve this thing. I sat down, I made lists. I was telling him, he's got to go back and he's got to study more to be more marketable. I really went and problem solved within the first week. And I remember we were down at the coast, and I was walking along the beach, and I said to myself, you are such an idiot. You are not practicing what you preach. Come on now, you build a solution. And I went back and I made a list of all his strengths and a list of all my strengths. I looked at what have we got. And at that point I had this little group that I was lecturing to every 2 months. And I just decided, build a solution. And we turned it into a business. And he is German, hence the surname. He's an Hungarian German. So he's particular with his admin. And that's how our business, our institute started. So do I use it in my life? Absolutely. Daily. I think constantly.
In your opinion, what are the 3 most important things people should master as they learn to use solution-focused thinking?
For me, it's about learning to listen differently to our clients, to the world, really. Learning, I think it's a solution-focused ear, a solution-focused lens, and a solution-focused tongue. I call them soul-ution, SOUL, soul-ution-focused lens, soul-ution-focused ear, and a soulful way of talking. I think the 3 most important things is to look at it people differently, to listen differently, and then to learn that art of using our words differently.
With that, which one of those 3 do you think is the hardest?
Which one's the hardest? For me personally, I think it's the words, which is probably the most important one, right? Because our whole approach is built on language and how we use language to shift our clients' attention. I mean, it's Evan George that said so beautifully, we are attention shifters, right? And you use language to do that. And for me, I can see through the problems. I live in Africa. I can see resourcefulness. I can see people making plans. I can see people doing amazing things with very little, I can hear strengths, coping, but to be mindful of how we use words and how we build our questions, I think that's the harder one for me.
Everyone brings previous experiences into what they did. Did you have a previous theoretical approach prior to solution-focused brief therapy, and how did it influence your current practice?
But sure, we all come from something, right? Somewhere. as a psychologist, you know, we were taught quite eclectically, study all approaches. And Joe, I had these wonderful visions and dreams of becoming an Ericksonian hypnotherapist. You know, I was listening to Jeffrey Zeig and Stephen Gilligan, all these incredible Ericksonians. I think it underpins a lot of how I do solution focused therapy. Like, for example, Erickson's utilization principle, you know, using what bites you on the nose, using what the client brings you. It's one of the things I do on a daily basis. You know, some solution focused clinicians are so good at formulating these beautiful questions. For me, I have to I'm very visual, Joe. I see very visual. And for me, it's about using what I see. You know, if a client brings me a cell phone in his pocket and it keeps ringing, I'm going to use the cell phone as a metaphor or in the therapy to help me formulate questions. So I think the Ericksonians helped me to use metaphors more, to utilize what I get, and then I just play with those principles. And obviously Erickson's way of seeing the person and not the problem, you know, that whole idea of really, really connecting to people and not to the stories they bring. And I worked really hard at becoming an Ericksonian until I met Steve DeShazer. And for me, it's luckily it's two approaches that have commonalities, you know, that seem to stem from the same umbrella theory, the same way of looking at people, the same way of approaching people.
What fields, you were mentioning some different fields that you've been dealing with and interacting with, like the banks and whatnot. What fields beyond counseling do you feel best aligned with solution-focused thinking?
Wow, teaching in schools, definitely. All right, let's start there. Definitely schools. It's strange. In this week, we're only in 2 days into the week, I've had 4 requests from 4 different schools, 2 for teacher training and 2 for peer counseling courses where they want help for teenagers to be trained to help other teenagers, right? So definitely in schools, definitely any field that works with children, any field that that empowers people to manage and cope. Yeah, Joe, I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but for me at this point, I definitely believe the world needs solution-focused therapy right now. I really think we need it. You know, if the world needed a therapist right now, my best hope is that it's a solution-focused therapist, and not a problem-based or an analytical therapist. But the world needs strength-based intervention that looks at resourcefulness and at a future focus of making it a better place, you know. So
were there ever any moments when you felt solution-focused brief therapy wasn't working for you?
You know, Joe, for me as a therapist, it's a constant daily mindful process of staying solution focused, right? Whether it's because of, you know, the turmoil within your own world and your own life with COVID and everything that's going on, or whether it's just a client going through a really hard, difficult situation. So is there ever a time I feel it isn't working? Or I don't think it's that I don't feel it's not working. I'd rather say, are there times I struggle with it? Yes. There are oftentimes I struggle to stay in that mindset where I feel I'm getting pulled into a problem-saturated space, and where I feel, gee, Jacqui, you got to work really hard within yourself now to pull this back, or to utilize the strengths within it. There are times that I see a client that I think, oh, you could have done so much better, Jacqui. You could have asked something different, or but as a whole, it's the only thing I ever go back to, and it's the only place where I want to work, and it's the only way in which I want to work.
If you had to come up with an advertising campaign for solution-focused brief therapy, what would your slogan be?
Oh, Mr. George. What would my slogan be? Well, my slogan is your future. Where is it? Your future starts now. So I'll stick to that. I'll say your future starts now.
Let's you've done your own interviews, you do your own webinars, you've been doing this for nearly 20 years with all sorts of different types of people. What am I missing? What would you like to add?
I think for me, it's about each one of us doing solution-focused therapy in our own creative ways. I can never be Evan George. I can never be Joe George. I can never do solution-focused therapy like all these wonderful people we interview. Joe, we meet all these fabulous, fantastic solution-focused thinkers, Ben Furman, and none of us can be like the other. And the only thing that I can think of that I really try and share and with everybody is, you need to become your own unique, creative, solution-focused practitioner. And you need to own that. So if you use metaphors in a solution-focused way, do it. We need to own our uniqueness and our creativity within this approach. Because for me, this is the one approach that allows us to be so creative, so creative, and so ourselves with the people we work, and for me, that's the magic, because you can really bring yourself in your own creative way to wherever you work, whether you're training, whether you're at school, whether you're sitting in front of a client. I love that about this approach.
It's a lot like writing, in that you'll have all these different teachers. They'll say, this is the way to write, but you have to start from a template of something, and then you can make it your own. But you can't say, oh, I'll just be eclectic and pick bits and pieces. But
exactly.
But after you know it, it really is. It's kind of like dancing, in that you can kind of put it together almost anyway.
Exactly. And that book Eliot wrote, The Art of Solution-Focused Therapy. I love that title, because it's this artful space, where you can dance in any way that that's your unique way. But it is this beautiful, creative, artful way of working with people. And I think for me, that's the magic. That's the beauty of this approach.
And what things do you have on the horizon? I mean, you mentioned the Train of Hope. It sounds like you're all over the place with different things. What's your best hope moving forward?
With everything, I said I want to spread it through Africa like an African wildfire, right? I want this bushfire of strengths and empowerment and dreaming and creating hopeful futures to really spread. So far, I've done it in Southern Africa. I can't wait to go into the rest of Africa. We'll see.
what do you think needs to be done to help it spread? Like, what needs to happen next?
Yes, last Friday, I was lecturing to intern psychologists, and they were forced to do the solution focus module. They hadn't come voluntarily. And one of the students, young student, he's now doing his year of internship. He's going to register next year, said he'd always thought that solution focused therapy was a band-aid approach. It's a list of questions. He said he always thought it's scripted. So what do I think we need to do? For me personally, I accept any university that asks me to come and train, even if it's like in the middle of nowhere, I go, because the more you spread it as well for the younger therapists, the less of a cult it becomes. And we're inviting new people into our groupie. But for me, it's just about every opportunity you get, you talk about it, you share it. We've got to show becoming therapists and teachers that there's something else out there.
If you find this interesting and haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe, like, or share this site, and hit that little bell button to get notifications as well.